Hello everyone, welcome back to the Lowland Greenhouse here at Carlton Carnivores. I've got a special plant spotlight for you guys today. Not a lowland plant per se, but it grows on the bottom shelves in the greenhouse here where it's a little on the cooler side, so that's why we're in here with it right now. This is one of the rarest of the temperate butterworts found in Europe, and it's a species that, like a lot of the temperate butterworts, seems to be rather difficult to find in cultivation, particularly here in the US. This one doesn't seem to be particularly prone to producing gemme either, so it's a little slower to propagate and therefore stays a little bit rarer than some of the others. And that is Pinguicula poldinii. This is a very unique Italian endemic. It is found only in the Val d'Arzino in northeastern Italy. So a very small, very restricted range, and within that valley, there's only a handful of small populations that are currently known. And unfortunately, a lot of those populations are found kind of along mining areas and roadsides. So they've actually populated the cutouts of the rock that have been exposed by human activity, but that also means they're fairly easily accessed by a lot of people, meaning also they are extremely threatened by overcollection, poaching by unscrupulous people. So trying to get them properly established in cultivation and more common is potentially essential to making sure it doesn't go extinct in the wild. So it is a very rare, very endangered, very threatened species of butterwort. It's not a particularly large species, as you can see here. These are nearly full size. They get a little bit bigger as they grow out into their full summer rosette, but not by too much. They grow on the limestone rock cliff faces and cutouts, again, of the valley of their habitat, places where water is seeping down and moss and muck kind of build up on the surface. So there's always permanent moisture, but it's very rocky, very exposed, open to the full sun exposure of that area. So they grow with relatively short, like most butterworts, short, simple roots that attach them to the rock, and then they spread out the rosettes on the face of that rock, hoping to catch small insects that come flying by. The rosettes are relatively simple leaves. They are more or less ovular in shape, a little bit tapered down to almost a point near the outer tips, and they grow to about maybe 3 inches across at maximum. So not very big, even as far as the temperate butterworts go. Things like Pinguicula scolii, which is also blooming right here, absolutely dwarf it. So it is one of these smaller species. Now, once these guys are growing for their season, right after they wake up, of course, they spend winter in a nice, tight little dormant hibernaculum that is more or less buried down within the substrate. And once temperatures warm up, it wakes up and produces its first few leaves, and then afterwards produces its flowers, which we will show on a better close-up here. This one's a little funky, but it's still got all the structures normal to the species. So those stalks usually only get around 3 to 4 inches tall, and then each one produces one single flower that has a relatively elongate lower lobe and then a slightly shorter upper lobe, the upper lobe divided into 2 smaller petal lobes, and of course the lower divided into 3. They're all relatively slim and more or less ovular in shape. The lower petal lobes are much longer than the upper petal lobes, and they also connect a little bit before the actual the full lobe on the bottom actually connects back with the rest of the flower. And then they have a short conical corolla tube that ends with a very small thin spur. The one that I have right now actually has a double spur, a kind of interesting mutation that this guy's produced right now. But they are somewhat variable in coloration. They can be anywhere from kind of very light to very deep violet in color, but that surrounds a usually white interior portion that surrounds the mouth of the corolla tube. Now, the lower lobe is the most variable. Sometimes only the very tips of the petals are that purple or lavender coloration. Sometimes it's more than half of those, but usually at least half of that lower lobe is white, and then it extends back into the corolla tube, where you have little striations of purple as well on the inside, and then it kind of fades to a blushed violet in the tube. And then the spur is usually a relatively simple, might be white, might be kind of greenish in color, but that's where nectar collects and attracts insects to come in and pollinate. Now, with a lot of temperate butterworts, it's possible that it may be self-pollinating capable, but it's kind of difficult to get it to do so. These guys generally tend to want to cross-pollinate with separate clones. If you're like me and you have only one, there's no real point to trying to pollinate it, therefore, and it's better to work on leaf pollings or hope that it produces gemme. But if you have more than one clone, you can, as with most butterworts, go in with like a toothpick or something. The stigma is hanging down in a flap on the upper portion of the flower. If it's hanging out forward like this, now again, these guys are kind of on cliff faces, so it would be hanging just like this, flower facing outward, and on the top, you have where it attaches to the flower stalk. So just underneath that attachment is where the stigma and the stamens are. Stamens are behind that little flap-like stigma, so if you go in there with a toothpick, you can kind of dig around carefully just behind the stigma to peck out pollen, and then deposit that on the front of the stigma on another flower and vice versa. After a couple days, the flower, when pollinated, will drop that corolla, the actual petals and everything, and then the ovary will eventually swell into this little round ball that turns hollow and brown when it's ripe and releases several dozen little tiny black seeds that look almost like dust. They're very, very small. Now, like most temperate butterworts, those seeds do generally require a cold stratification period. So they will have been produced kind of midsummer. They get spread out onto the soil surface, and there may be a handful that germinate early before fall and winter comes in. But for the most part, they're laying out there, and fall and winter come in, snow and ice move in, everything gets cold, and that stratifies the seed over winter until next spring, when they germinate far more readily and in greater numbers. Now, if you are lucky, this species should, although it doesn't seem to do so as much, it should produce little gemme when it goes dormant. So as fall comes in, those summer leaves all start to die away, and what's left in the middle is this little tiny hard kind of teardrop-shaped bud that is down in the soil. And around the base, if it produces them, are little tiny miniature hibernacula, and those are the gemme. They will detach from the parent plant fairly easily and basically get spread around by water and wind to root into a new spot come spring. So if you're lucky and you get those produced, you can remove those, and then come the end of their dormancy period, sow them on the soil surface, and you will get brand new plants. Otherwise, you can take leaf pullings. You want to get the base of that leaf out as well, although sometimes if you get just a piece, it can work if you got a nice clean water to like float that on. You can throw that in the soil surface, and it'll eventually sprout after a couple weeks. Around the edges, you get little plantlets that grow up, and you have new plants. Now, the general cultivation requirements of this species are fairly straightforward, and other than the temperate cold dormancy part, they're kind of similar to a lot of Mexican butterworts. And you can see I have it in roughly we'll say 2-to-1 perlite peat mix here. So the peat is a little bit tannin heavy, so it's stained all the perlite brown as well here. But these guys tend to prefer a slightly more mineral soil, but with a little bit of organic material in there. Hence, heavy on the perlite, or you can also use things like perhaps akadama, maybe a little bit vermiculite. If you have a nice lava rock, you can actually plant them on that, and they'll probably be nice and happy as long as it wicks moisture. But you want something that is very aerated and open, fairly mineral, and maybe slightly on the alkaline side, because these guys do grow on limestone cliff faces in the wild. And if you want to replicate their wild environment, you can try and figure out a way to grow them so that they're vertical like this. And that will actually replicate how they would grow in the wild. Sticking out, so all the flowers kind of stick out from the side of the cliff here. But you want to keep that fairly moist at all times. You don't want them sopping wet, like soaking in a flooded pot, but you do want them consistently moist at all times. They do not appreciate drying out. They don't appreciate flooding generally either, just nice and generally moist. Moderately humid if you have a nice windowsill that you can just set like a tray of pebbles on to fill with water, and that'll bring up the ambient humidity. That will generally be enough for these guys. Or if you're like me and you have a big greenhouse, that takes care of that problem. Sunlight, they can generally take almost as much light as you can possibly give them. Again, they are growing in full sun in their natural environment. It's not the highest of elevations, around 450 to 550 meters in elevation, so 1,600 feet elevation, roughly. But they are fairly northern, so they aren't getting like equatorial sun exposure. So you can grow them in preferably as strong light as you can. In most places, putting them outside is probably going to expose them to slightly warmer conditions than they want. So indoor growing is probably going to be more suitable unless you live in a further north climate. So in the US, maybe if you're in the Dakotas or Minnesota and such, you might be able to grow these guys outdoors. Just watch for those heat waves in summer and try and avoid that. New England might be pretty replicating of their natural environment, actually. But you want as bright as light as you can. If they tinge a little bit reddish, then you'll know you're getting plenty of light, but usually these guys will stay bright green all around. Temperatures, again, are probably the most critical aspect beyond the soil for these guys, in that they're going to want daytime temperatures that preferably don't exceed 80 degrees Fahrenheit very often. It might spike that high every now and again, but they're generally going to be on the relatively cool side because these do come from a European temperate valley environment. So daytime temperatures of around maybe 70 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit. At nighttime, maybe that drops down into the 60s or 50s, and they'll be happy with that. There's not a huge drop in here, but they do experience a little bit of that, and that keeps them happy through the summer. And in winter, again, these guys will start to die back. As soon as you see them dying back, you want to prepare to put them into a cold place. If they're doing it in the middle of summer, you don't want to let those hibernacula sit for too long exposed, because then they might try and wake up and have a weaker second round, and they might not survive through that. They are more prone to rot and such. So once they go dormant, if it's like middle of summer or still a little bit warmer, you may want to put them through a fridge dormancy, and that's probably the easiest for most people. You can do it in pot, or you can take the hibernacula out and put them into a little baggie and store them for a minimum of about 3 months. They need those cold temperatures for that time to fulfill their obligate dormancy requirements. If you don't give that, again, just like if you were to leave them out when they're going dormant, like if they do so in kind of midsummer, you will see them eventually collapse. They won't be able to continue growing. They'll basically exhaust themselves of their resources. They won't have the triggers they need to flower properly, and so on. So give them that dormancy period, and then once that's over, bring them out into a nice bright location again, give them a little more water, let them warm up, and you'll see them start to grow again. Now, fairly straightforward if you can provide those conditions. Again, fairly mineral, but a little bit organic soil, maybe on the alkaline side, bright light, moderate temperatures, not too hot, and then that cold dormancy period. Now, these guys are still very uncommon in cultivation, so it may be kind of difficult to find them, but you may be able to find individual growers who are specializing in temperate butterworts and such who might have these guys available for sale. Expect, though, they may cost a pretty penny, especially as far as butterworts go, maybe 40, 50 bucks a piece for these plants. Unless you're in Europe, they may be a little more common since they're a little easier to grow there, and of course that's closer to their native range. Just make sure you are getting them from a reputable source, someone who is actually propagating them in cultivation, and it's not wild collected plants, because we do not want to put more pressure onto those wild populations. But it's certainly a very beautiful plant to grow, especially if you can get them mature enough, happy and well fed enough to start producing. They can produce sometimes 6, 7, 8 flowers at a time in one season, and that is quite the show, even if it's one plant or if it's a whole colony all blooming at once. It's a very beautiful high contrast appearance with those nice white and purple petals. Now, that is about all that I have for that species. Certainly, if there's anything that I've missed, questions that you have, leave them in the comments below. And make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything that's coming up. Give a like if you enjoyed this. Share it with somebody else if you know anyone who would like to learn about this species. And if you'd like to learn more about the plants and animals that I work with, you can find my website at carltoncarnivores.com or on social media, Carlton Carnivores, on all platforms that I am at. If you'd like to help support the production of these videos, support the growing of these plants, and the editing time that it takes to get these things right, consider buying some of the plants or merchandise that are available at the website shop, or become a Patreon member where you get early access to the videos, access to the monthly seed contests that I do, things that you're not going to find in the shop usually, or that are expensive in the shop and you can get simply for the cost of membership. You can also do one-time donations at places like coffee.com if you don't want to do a monthly subscription, or contact me for other methods. Most of the links for these things will be in the video description below, but until next time, I'm Hawken Carlton, and this is Carlton Carnivores.